I want to welcome you to the General Counsel on Finance and Administration, GCFA, our Form I-9 compliance webinar. We're glad to have you with us. It's a practical guide for managers and HR representatives. I want to go ahead and note for you today that we welcome your questions. We'll provide time at the end of the webinar to answer as many of those questions as we can during this time. If you'll please use the chat feature and put your questions there, I'll be sure to be the moderator. My name is Lori Boffman. I'm GCFA's Learning and Development Instructor, and I'll be helping our host today for moderating the chat. So please feel free to use that chat feature. The slide deck will be provided to you, to all the participants that registered today, so you will have a copy of that. And a recording will also be made available on the gcfa.com website. I do want to let you know about our legal disclaimer. This webinar is provided for educational and informational purposes only. The content presented is not legal advice and should not be relied upon as a substitute for consultation with qualified legal counsel. I'd like to go ahead and welcome Amy Rhodes, GCFA's Human Resources Manager. Amy has over 20 years of HR experience in a variety of roles and within organizations including state government, healthcare, banking and retail, and Habitat for Humanity International. Amy is a graduate of Troy University and resides in Alabama. Welcome, Amy.
Thank y'all so much for having me. I hope everybody can hear me. I know that this is not the most exciting topic, but it is necessary. So we really appreciate everyone joining us, and hopefully we can answer a lot of questions that you might have. Now, there is a lot we could cover as far as I-9s go, like documents and visas and green cards and everything, but we're going to try to focus this webinar specifically on the I-9 form itself, okay? So here's what we're going to cover today, and it should take us about 45 minutes or so, so we should end up with time for questions at the end. So we're going to talk about why the I-9 compliance matters. We're going to look at the I-9. We're going to talk about Section 1, which the employee completes, Section 2, which is you, the employer, retention and storage, common errors, how to avoid them, and then best practices and key takeaways. So hopefully everyone is at least a little bit familiar with the I-9, but let's talk a little bit about who, the what, the when, the where, the why. So what is an I-9? It's a standardized process to verify employment eligibility of individuals in the United States and its territories. Why do we do I-9s? Well, basically because the government says we have to. In 1986, Congress passed the Immigration Reform and Control Act, which made it illegal for U.S. employers to hire individuals who don't have work authorizations in the U.S. But you say, well, I don't hire any foreigners or anything like that. Well, unfortunately, the government isn't just going to take your word on that. They do need it in writing and they do require proof. So, who has to complete I-9s? All U.S. employers. This includes Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the Commonwealth Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam. So this is regardless of size, industry, or location. You are legally required to complete an I-9 for every individual you hire for employment. This includes full-time, part-time, seasonal, student workers, everyone except contractors, which are 1099 workers. The only exceptions to this are if you are doing business in American Samoa. They do not require I-9s in American Samoa. Now, if you have an employee originally from American Samoa working in the United States or Puerto Rico, they have to follow the I-9 rules. But if you're doing business in American Samoa, they don't require I-9s there. If you have any employees who were hired on or before November 6th of 1986, this is their current hire date, not somebody who was rehired. But if you have an employee who's been around since November 6th of 1986, they were grandfathered in and don't need an I-9. If you have individuals hired for casual domestic work and private home on a sporadic basis, this is if you have like a housekeeper, they don't need an I-9 for you personally. And then those independent contractors, those 1099 workers, these are not W-2 employees. They don't have set hours. You don't provide tools to do the job. They don't clock in and out. They're not on payroll. So this could be maybe if you have housekeeping who comes to clean the church, or maintenance, or yard maintenance is a big one that they don't need 1099s. I mean, I-9. Failure to comply with these I-9 rules and regulations can result in fines ranging from $252 to almost $30,000 per violation under federal law. And that's per form, per employee. So just as an FYI, Walmart was penalized a few years ago in the millions of dollars. So as we've stated, compliance is not optional. So everyone has to do an I-9. Accuracy and consistency will reduce risk, and we'll talk more about that, and ethical and fair hiring practices. I know that churches can sometimes be exempt from certain things. This is not one of them, okay? Clergy either, but this will not affect clergy benefits in any way. So you have a new hire, and it's the new hire that fills out the I-9, not an applicant, but somebody who has accepted an offer. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And they are going to fill out section 1, your new employee. Then you are going to review their documents that they give you proving that they can work in the US. You are going to complete section 2, and then you're going to retain those copies and forms. The I-9 form is updated every so often, so it does have an expiration date. This is a screenshot of the top of the I-9 here, and you can see this current I-9 that we're using expires May 31st of 2027. Now, does the government always update it on the day it expires? No, they do not. So you do have to keep checking. Always make sure that you're using the most up-to-date version. It's best practice to download the form directly from the USCIS site. This is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. These are the people responsible for the I-9. As a side note, because I'm in HR, this is also good practice for your tax forms and your FMLA paperwork. So what I do as an HR professional, and what some of you may already be doing, is I keep an Excel spreadsheet as a checklist for all new hires. So at the top of this spreadsheet, I'd have my pre-employment information. That would include the offer letter, the date it was sent, the date it was returned, signed, background checks, have they been completed? And then the second part would be employment or first day information. So this would include your I-9, your tax forms, your handbook acknowledgments, dress code. I attach the hyperlink to those forms in the spreadsheet. Okay. I do want to note that I-9 is available in Spanish, but only for use in Puerto Rico. Okay. Everybody else, we have to use the English version. If you have an employee and they speak Spanish, you can use the Spanish language version to help translate to the English version, but you cannot complete the Spanish version. Only Puerto Rico right now is allowed to use the Spanish version. All right, the employee section. So section 1 of the I-9 must be completed by the employee. The only exception is the case of a translator or if they have a disability. Employees must sign the form even if a preparer or translator helps them. And then each preparer or translator has to sign the supplement A, which is page 3 of the I-9. Okay. If an individual is under the age of 18, the minor parent or legal guardian can complete section 1, and either the minor or parent can sign it, or the parent can write individual under age 18 in the signature block, and then the parent has to complete as the preparer in the certification block on supplement A, remember, page 3 of the I-9. The first section of the I-9 must be completed on their first day of employment, or at least by their first day of employment. You can give them the I-9 before their first day of employment, however, only after you have a signed offer letter. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So this is section 1. It's the top of the first page of the I-9. And it requires full legal name, their address, and their birthday. So those 3 things are required. And their name should match the documents they give you to verify. Social security numbers are not mandatory unless you are an e-verifier employer. And to determine if you're an E-Verify employer, you will need to check your state requirements. Not all states are required to use E-Verify. If you do use E-Verify, please make sure you have the poster prominently displayed stating that you do participate in E-Verify. E-Verify is a whole other topic. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get into that. But please, again, check with your state, consult an attorney if you need to. Of course, you can always use E-Verify even if it's not required. And then here, email address and telephone number, also not required. That's going to be up to you. It's going to be up to the employee. Okay. And then this part, check one of the following boxes to attest their citizenship. So the employee is going to attest whether they're one, a citizen of the United States, two, a non-citizen national of the United States. This is an individual born in American Samoa or certain former citizens of the former Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, or certain children of non-citizen nationals born abroad. A mouthful. Box number 3 here is a lawful permanent resident. So this is an individual who's not a U.S. citizen, but resides in the U.S. under legally recognized and lawfully recorded permanent resident status. The employee will need to provide you unexpired proof. And then box number 4 is that alien authorized to work. So this is an individual who has authorization to work in the U.S., but is not a citizen, a non-citizen national, or a lawful permanent resident. Again, they will need to submit specific unexpired proof. Now, it is your responsibility as the employer to make sure that the employee completes all required fields. If you are audited, which we'll talk more about in a minute, you will be held liable if the employee completes this incorrectly, forgets a required field, or doesn't check the appropriate box correlating with the IDs that they give you. So here's what I typically do. Again, some of you may be doing this already. I will call the applicant and make a verbal offer of employment. Once they accept verbally, then I will email them an official offer letter stating that they need to return the signed offer letter within so many days. Once I receive that signed offer letter, they are now an employee. I will email them back with information regarding their first day of employment, and this can include simple stuff like where to park, who you'll be meeting with, what you'll be doing your first day, what time to report to work. I also inform them that they'll need to bring proper IDs as stated on page 2 of the attached I-9. As a side note, I also attached the dress code. Now, some organizations do have the new employee complete the I-9 in advance, but I will tell you that inevitably the employee will complete it wrong and has to redo it, or just will completely forget to bring it with them on day 1. So what I say is, we've attached an I-9. Please be prepared to complete section 1 and provide the appropriate IDs listed on page 2 under the list of acceptable documents. You absolutely cannot tell them what IDs to bring. So let's talk about the employer section. So you are to review the documents that they give you. You are to ensure the documents reasonably appear genuine and relate to the employee. You're going to record the document information accurately, and you're going to complete and sign within the required time frame. So we'll look at this in a minute. There's a list A, a list B, and a list C of documents. Okay, so you have to follow the directions under which column they go. The government does not expect you to be an ID expert. Okay, it says reasonably review and they appear reasonably genuine. So you want to check for spelling, look at the picture, expiration dates. Before you make any employment decisions, if you have any questions about this, you will need to consult an immigration attorney. So here's that list of acceptable documents. This is page 2 of the I-9. These are the only acceptable documents the employee can present to you, okay? And again, you absolutely 100% cannot tell them what documents to bring. You can only supply them with this list of acceptable documents. You can remind them, however, that they will need either one from list A or one from B and one from C. And so that's one of the biggest issues that I've run into is someone will inevitably bring me 2 IDs from list C, which typically Social Security and birth certificate. This is not allowed. It has to be one from A or one from B and one from C. Okay. You'll have some employees too that will bring in every single ID they own. Just tell them to pick, make they can decide which one they want to use. If your employee IDs are expired or they come to work the first day and they don't have any, they do have 3 days to bring in their IDs documents or to produce proof that they are getting new ones. So these are called receipt documents. And at the bottom of the list of acceptable documents, sorry, we cut it off here, but at the bottom of this list of acceptable documents, they have instructions for receipt documents. So if they've lost it, it's expired, you can't, illegible, you can accept the receipt, official receipt. So they have to go down to Social Security or the DMV or the passport agency, whatever. You can accept an official receipt. Of course, it has to make sure that it is from the Social Security office, from the DMV. DMV is pretty good. They'll give you a copy of a temporary one. Also, foreign nationals, they can continue to work based on having filed an application for an extension, okay? But after 90 days, you will need to consult an attorney if they have not brought their IDs in or done the re-verification, which we will also talk about in a minute. So I have had to push back an employee start date due to them not having proper IDs or bringing it within 3 days. So I had a new employee one time who moved, he relocated, and of course the only thing he had on him was a driver's license. Everything else was boxed up. So we had to push him back a week so he could go through all his boxes and try to find his passport or social or birth certificate or something. All right, I do want to point out there is a new law in Colorado. So if anybody is listening from the great state of Colorado, they have just passed a new bill. This is HB as in boy 26-1283. You'll want to Google it. So this states that employers cannot retain IDs for more than 10 hours for verification purposes. This isn't typically an issue. So the new hire comes in, the new employee, they present you with your IDs, you look over their IDs, you make copies of their IDs, you hand the IDs back. You should not be holding on to anybody's IDs anyway. But part two of this new law says that employers must now provide written notice when verifying employment eligibility. So this notice must inform employees of the new law's protections. It has to be provided in writing, in English, and in the employee's primary language if that employer knows that language is not English. And then they have to sign it, and then you retain it in their records. As of right now, Colorado doesn't have any sort of template for this, of course, but you're going to want to go ahead and start implementing this. Again, it's HB 26-1283 there in Colorado. And again, if you're emailing the new hire, this will be a good time with not only I-9, but to have that form as well, stating that, hey, we're going to need to verify your IDs. All right, so this is section 2, or the employer section. So this is the section you're going to complete. All right, so you will fill in the information needed based on the IDs or documents that they provide. You'll follow the instructions under the list of acceptable documents. So list A is typically going to be a passport or a green card. So they can have one of those, or they're going to need one from B and one from C. B is typically going to be your driver's license, some sort of picture ID, a military ID. And C is typically a social security or birth certificate. Okay. Birth certificates are the only copied IDs that are acceptable. Okay. All other IDs must be original for you to make copies, except in remote instances, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, if you do receive a copy for a birth certificate, it must be, an official, have the official copy of the seal still on there. It must look like an official copy. So in this instance, this person gave us a passport. So you're going to list the document title as shown under one here, U.S. passport for document title. Then you're going to list the issuing authority. In this case, it was the Department of State. You're going to list the document number as listed on the document. Now, you can use common abbreviations, the Immigration Services states. That includes like DL for driver's license or SSA for Social Security. So common abbreviations are fine. And then don't forget the expiration date here. Of course, you know, Social Security cards and birth certificates are not going to have expiration dates, so you'll just leave that blank. And then the the employer is going to fill out the bottom part of this. And you're going to put the name of the person completing it and their title, the name of the company, your address. They're going to sign it and date it. Okay. These two dates, this is going to be the first date of the employees. So whatever their date of employment was, and then today's date. These dates can be different, but they must not be more than 3 days apart. Okay. Now you'll notice there's a box here. It says check here if used an alternative procedure. Authorize the Department of Human Service, Homeland Security to examine documents. We're going to talk more about this in a minute, but I do want you to make aware of this checkbox here. We just looked at this was just an example we provided of a foreign passport. According to the list of acceptable documents, a foreign passport must contain this stamp. It's called a temporary I-551 stamp, or this temporary I-551 printed notation on this. This appears to be a student visa right here. So just to make you aware, they're not going to all look like this. So just be aware. If you have any questions, of course, the immigration attorney can help you. So you're going to the employee accepts the offer of employment. Okay. The employee is going to complete section 1 no later than their first day work for pay. They are going to give you documents and forms to prove that they're authorized to work in the U.S. Then you, the employer, are going to complete section 2 no later than the third business day after the employee starts work. Okay. And then if their work authorization has expired, we're going to talk about supplement B here in a moment. So remote examination of documents. If you participate in E-Verify and are in good standing, you are qualified to remotely examine your employee's documentation using the Department of Homeland Security authorized alternative procedure. Okay. E-Verify, for those that you don't know, is the free internet-based system that compares information entered by the employer from the I-9 to records available at the Department of Homeland Security and Social Security Administration to confirm employment eligibility. Okay. I cannot tell you whether or not you should participate in E-Verify. Again, some states require it, but you can absolutely use it even if not required. If you have remote workers but don't participate in E-Verify, you will have to have the employee's I-9 completed by a representative in person. Employers can delegate I-9 completion to anyone over the age of 18 who's willing to act on their as an authorized representative. Okay. DHS says it's best practice to choose someone who can follow instructions carefully, avoid family members if possible. This is the person who's going to sign the I-9 on your behalf as a representative. Notaries can sometimes serve in this role, but state rules vary. Some states do not allow this at all. And whoever signs it, employers remain fully responsible for the accuracy of the I-9, even if you completed by someone else. So once you receive the completed I-9 and IDs, you will want to review it. And if you have to have them redo it, then so be it. It has to be completed correctly. So if you're, again, in E-Verify to remotely examine your document, the employee's documents, you're going to want to examine the copies front and back if the document is two-sided and of course, make sure they appear to be reasonably genuine. You have to conduct a live video interaction with the individual presenting the documents to ensure the documentation reasonably appears to be genuine again and related to that individual. The employee must first transmit a copy of the documents to the employer and then present the same documents during the live video interaction. Then you will indicate on the Form I-9 that little box that we talked about that said an alternative procedure was completed. And then you're going to retain clear and legible copies of the documentation front and back if two-sided. So here's that little checkbox again. If you use that alternative procedure. So if you have somebody who's going to re-verify employment, and re-verification is for those employees whose employment authorization or documentation of employment authorization expires. So these are going to be people that say they're eligible to work in the United States, not necessarily a citizen. Okay. If you're going to complete remote documentation, you need to check that I-9 on Supplement B. Now, Supplement B is going to be the last page of the I-9, page 4. And then you're going to continue to complete the I-9 according to the instructions. And then, of course, there's a bunch of information and guidance on the USCIS website, as well as in the M274 handbook. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. If you do a re-verification, do not do a new e-verify case. Again, retain clear copies front and back in a paper or electronic format. That is also acceptable, but you'll need to have clear copies in that electronic format as well. The retention document copies allowed opportunity at the time of routine if you are audited by DHS or ICE, so that they can find those, what they need, the I-9s quickly. Okay. So if they come in and they're like, we need to audit you, they're going to want those forms within 72 hours. So let's talk a little bit more about the re-verification and rehire. Okay. Supplement B, like I said, is currently page 4 of the I-9 and is used only in the following cases: for re-verification of employment, to report a legal name change, or for rehire. For non-U.S. citizens here on work or student visas, those visas do expire. While it is the employee's responsibility to make sure that their visa or passport or green card are current, employers must track the expiration dates of work authorization documents to ensure re-verification is completed before their expiration. It is good practice that you notify the employees of the upcoming expiration starting in about 6 months in advance, because this is not a timely process. It is also your responsibility to make sure the documentation is correct and that you have updated, unexpired documentation. So set calendar reminders, whatever you need to do, start 6 months out that they need, their documentation is going to expire. After that expiration date, they may not continue employment without updating or re-verifying your employee's I-9. To maintain I-9 compliance, Supplement B must be completed, signed, and dated on or before the expiration of the previous work authorization document. Now, the following documents will never need to be re-verified. These are U.S. passports or U.S. passport card, alien registration receipt, permanent resident cards, or any of the List B documents. That's going to include like your driver's license or military ID. Okay. You should not ever have to re-verify U.S. citizens and non-citizen nationals. So if they check box 1 or 2 on the front part of that I-9, they shouldn't ever need to be re-verified. If your employee has a name change, you are not required to update the Form I-9 when your employee has a legal name change. However, it is recommended that you maintain correct information on the I-9 and note any name changes in Supplement B as well. Although the I-9 regulations don't require employees to present documentation to show that they have changed their name, you should take steps to be reasonably assured that your employee's identity if there has been a legal name change. Okay. You may also encounter situations other than a legal name change where an employee informs you that their identity is different from the time the I-9 was previously completed. If your employee informs you that their name, date of birth, social security number, whatever it might be, is substantially different from what they previously provided, and they're unable to provide evidence linking the new information to the identity previously used, you need to consult the USCIS website for next steps and possibly consult an immigration attorney. And we say this because it does happen. Most of all, if you're going to do an employee name change, if you do it for one, do it for all. Consistency is definitely the key. So rehired employees. If you rehire employees within 3 years of a date that a previous I-9 was completed, you can either complete a new I-9 or you can complete Supplement B of their previous I-9. Okay. So if you choose to use their original I-9, you'll pull it from their file. You'll confirm that it relates to the employee. You'll review the original I-9 to determine if your employee is still authorized to work, and whether that authorization documentation presented or previous reverification has since expired or been automatically extended, or if your employee is still authorized to work and his or her employment authorization document is still unexpired, then you'll enter the date of the rehire in the space provided in Supplement B. If the version of the previous completed Form I-9 has expired, you're going to need to complete either a new I-9 or, and then you'll sign and date it. If you do choose to complete a whole new I-9, which sometimes is just easier, then you'll just attach it to the previous one and file them together. So this is Supplement Part B. So this is reverification. Employees should remind their employees at least 90 days, but I would start at 6 months. Again, we talked about that, that their employment authorization expires to prepare for reverification. I would do this in writing, probably through an email. Okay. You're going to examine their acceptable documents. So upon re-verification, the employee must present unexpired documents from either List A, remember that passport, green card, something to that effect. Establishes both identity and employment eligibility, or List C, which establishes employment eligibility. Remember, B, any forms they give you in B are probably not going to, they're not going to be needed to be re-verified. Okay. You will pull their current I-9 and you will complete this back page, Supplement B, and then with the new documentation they give and the expiration date of the new work authorization. So in this example, it looks like Jane Doe needed re-verification. So one, or has been rehired. So she's been rehired. She has a new last name. So that's there. And then the employment authorization document, the title, and the new expiration date. And then your name, signature, and today's date. Now, notice this little box down here if you use that alternative procedure again. So, mistakes, record keeping, and audits. It is okay to make mistakes, okay? The government knows that we are human, but there are correct ways to fix any I-9 errors. So the proper correction method you see here is to draw a single line through the incorrect information and then write the correct information in the margin, initial and date it. They want it in blue or black ink. Don't use red or any fun colors. But you will also need to attach a written explanation why this correction is needed. So our Jane Doe here, maybe she forgot she just got married and she forgot she's got the new name on her social now. So she has corrected this correctly. Okay. Now, there are some corrections that cannot be easily made, and I-9s the new I-9 may need to be completed. If they have filled out their social wrong, it's going to be hard to fill this out somewhere else to correct it. So maybe they just need to start over. You absolutely cannot backdate corrections to make them appear timely. Okay. Corrections must reflect the actual date they are made, not the original hire date. So altering the form in any way that obscures the original information without proper documentation, this correction must be visible and valid. Okay. So just remember that the Department of Homeland Security, they're not worried about a correction here and there. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. However, I can say that they are very concerned when you try to cover up mistakes or maybe make too many mistakes. Again, there may be times we just need to start over on a blank I-9. All right, remember we talked about sending the I-9 to the new hire prior to their start date. Sometimes when you send the I-9 in anticipation of their start date, they will complete the entire form, including your section, the employer section. They just get on a roll and they just keep filling it out. This will require the employee to complete a new I-9. Okay. One of the things I know for sure that DHS checks is consistency in handwriting and ink. So please don't make the mistake of thinking you could just sign the I-9 because the employee filled out your completed info. That they will catch those. All right, record keeping. We've talked about they must be easily acceptable, available should an audit occur. It is important that you have an I-9 for every active and on leave employee. Okay. I-9s need to be either kept for 3 years after their hire date or 1 year after termination, whichever is later. Okay. Go through your I-9s regularly. So either every time you have a new hire or at least quarterly, put a calendar reminder. If you keep the I-9s of terminated employees rather than purging them in this time frame here, the I-9, 3 years or 1 year after termination. If you keep them in that file still, you don't purge them, they will be subject to the audits as well. So the less ammunition you can give DHS, the better. So again, keep I-9s for all employees and terminate employees that have not met the cutoff date. Keep copies of the supporting documents, list A or B and C. And then if you use E-Verify, keep that certification page that E-Verify will give you. Okay. On occasion, you may get audited. So I try to stay ahead of the process and self-audit as well. So the first thing I do in a self-audit is I will create a spreadsheet, either using information from payroll if I have it, or a current list of active and on leave employees. Okay. So any employees that we're currently paying or on leave, I go through and make sure they have an I-9 on file. Okay. This is going to be the very first thing that DHS and ICE ask for as well. They're going to all your current or on leave employees. I put this on a spreadsheet so I can also track missing information and corrections. To correct multiple recording errors on the form, you can redo the section on a new I-9 and attach it to the old one. The new I-9 can also be completed if major errors, such as entire sections were left blank, section 2 was completed based on unacceptable documents, any of that need to be corrected. But make sure you include a note in the file regarding the reason you made the changes or used an I-9. Okay. When I take over an HR role or department, one of the first things I do is audit the I-9 since I am now responsible for them. In my last HR role, I couldn't find an I-9 on a current employee who'd been there for 4 years. I searched all of the current I-9s to make sure it wasn't attached to somebody else's by mistake. I searched the terminated I-9s to make sure it wasn't misfiled. And I checked her personnel folder to make sure it didn't get filed there by mistake. Could not find it. To correct this, I had her complete an I-9, give me documentation. I verified the documentations. I signed and dated the employer section with the current date. I did put her original hire date on there, but used the current date where she signs and where I signed. And then I typed up a Word document stating what the error was, why the dates don't match, and how I corrected it. I attached all forms, including copies of her IDs and documents, and filed them with the other current I-9s. So you can correct mistakes. It is fine. So in closing, you need to retain the I-9s 3 years after hire or 1 year after employment ends, whichever is later. Please make sure they are stored securely and confidentially. Only certain people should have access to these files, along with all the other personnel files. And then paper or electronic storage is permitted as long as the records remain accessible. So these are the most common mistakes we've seen employers make. So sometimes the employee will forget to date or they'll put their birthday again under the part where they date. Again, you have to be responsible for looking for this stuff. They'll forget to check the box indicating whether or not they're a citizen. Then employers forget to list the documents used or you have incomplete information. Employers will forget to use one from A or one from B and C. You'll forget to put the dates at the bottom. That's a common one. Employers also don't fully complete the part with their name, title, business name, and address. I will tell you, if you are audited and you have to submit this info and copies of your I-9s to DHS and ICE, they're not going to take the time to figure out who it belongs to. Okay. And then it will just appear as though you're missing an I-9 for an employee or a whole bunch of employees. Another error is not completing supplement B if needed. And then the biggest error is not completing your part by the third day. Okay. If you use E-Verify, they specifically ask why you don't complete it within 3 days. And this is a red flag. There have been a few organizations that have also gotten in trouble. One for using the I-9 to perform background checks. You having applicants complete the I-9 and then using that information provided it is very illegal. Background checks need to be completely separate and have a separate consent form. I-9 should never, ever, ever be used as a pre-screening tool for employment. The other thing that gets a lot of organizations in trouble is only having those new employees whose name, appearance, or whatever aren't quote unquote American. So only having certain type of people complete I-9s. This is extremely illegal. All employees, if they are on payroll, have to complete an I-9. So train your HR and hiring managers regularly. Y'all have all been part of this training here. Hopefully you got something out of it. Make sure you use the current form of the I-9. You're going to review the forms for completeness before filing, conduct periodic internal self-audits, and then monitor official guidance for changes. You can go on to the USCIS site. If you just Google Form I-9, it should take you there. And you can sign up for webinars and whenever they have changes, stuff like that. Now, they don't always send out notification when they have updated the I-9. So that's why it's always best practice to have the most updated form and that hyperlink. Okay. So remember, I-9, every hire, period. Complete section 1 by their first day of employment. You complete section 2 by the third day. You're going to retain the forms for the required period, and then you're going to be accurate and then consult an immigration employer attorney if needed. So here's that handbook for employees. This is the M274. It's a lot. It's really long, but you can search it. It's at the USCIS site, as well as this is where the I-9 is. And then if you need to look into E-Verify as well.